if you're selling your soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, well, nothing's gonna change if all you do is wish you could wake up and it not be true. Join a union. Fight for better pay. You better join a union, brother. Organize today. You'll see where the problem really lies when the union comes around. Rich men earning north of $1 million wanna keep the working folk down. Wanna keep the working folk down. If you form a union, you'll soon find that working people are all of one kind. So we ain't gonna punch down on those who need a bit of understanding and some solidarity. That ain't right, friend. If you're struggling with your health and you're putting on the pounds, doctor gives you opiates to help you get around. Well, wouldn't it be better for folks like you and me if medicine was subsidized and healthcare was free? Join a union. Fight for better pay. Come on and join a union, sister. Organize today. It comes down to the self same thing if you're black or white or brown. Rich men earning north of $1 million wanna keep the working folk down. Wanna keep the working folk down. Well, we know your culture wars are there to distract while libertarian billionaires avoid paying tax. You wanna talk about bathrooms while the floodwaters rise, the forest is on fire and the wind burns our eyes. Something's wrong here. Well, they wanna divide us because together we're strong. Are you gonna take action now you sung your damn song? If you don't like the rich man having total control, you better get the union to roll. Join a union. Fight for better pay. Come on and join a union. Organize today. Don't matter if you live in the city or some little country town. Rich men earning north of $1 million. Rich men earning north of $1 million. I say rich men earning north of $1 million wanna keep the working folk down. Wanna keep the working folk down. If you're selling your soul and you're working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, join a union.
Amen. Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Ramona Beck, a beautifully authentic cisgender woman, rich in melanin, worthy of deep connection, and more than good enough. And I will serve as your worship leader today. I'm grateful to share the service with you this morning, both in person and online. Our church is becoming a beloved community, a place where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. We are a community committed to social justice and to supporting the various spiritual and ethical paths of our members and friends. The congregation was founded in 1830 and worshiped in this building since 1889, evolving to acknowledge that we occupy stolen land that is the ancestral home of the Adena and Hopewell cultures, and most recently, the Miyamiya and Shawnee peoples. This uncomfortable truth and historical tension that we intentionally recognize and internalize as we struggle with the implications of that profound injustice. If you would like to know more about the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati or the Unitarian Universalist faith, please contact us by emailing member-care@firstuu.com. For those watching at home, this email is in the description of today's service or on our YouTube page. Our congregation strives to be welcoming to all, so you will see signs for various accommodations posted around the church and listed in the order of service. Please ask the ushers if you have any questions. Today's beautiful flowers are from the Flower Committee and Nancy Sawyer, all about love, and special recognition for teachers in our congregation who have labored and continue to labor to educate future generations. Before we begin our service today, please rise and wave to the people watching from home. We love you. Now enjoy greeting your neighbors here until the beautiful sound ringing from the bowl brings us back together. As we light our chalice, I will share with you Now is the Time by W.E. Du Bois. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow. Now not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or some future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. And I know my brother, W.E.B. Du Bois, would agree that the time is moment by moment. So let us think moment by moment. Let us understand life is moment by moment. And moment is the time. Our opening hymn. Number 128, All That Is Our Life. All that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift, which we are all to use, to build a common ground. And make our armies for needs which others serve.
sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad.
Thank you. Part of being a beloved community is sharing joys and concerns with each other. If you would like to share anything using the various methods listed on the back of your order of service, please fill out the form and place it in the offering basket when it is passed or on the desk at the back of the sanctuary as you leave the service. Because we are having our water communion today, we will dispense with the dropping of stones in the water of the love of our community. We do want to remember, however, those who suffer outside of our walls and in our walls. I want to especially remind us to be painfully aware of the pain and sufferings of the families of those murdered in Jacksonville, Florida, and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and others that endure at this moment who are impacted by acts of self-hatred, not hatred of any, self-hatred. And might our beloved community give others permission to engage in self-love rather than self-hatred. One of those victims was from my home church, the 52-year-old woman that was serving as an Uber driver whose car received 11 bullets, attended my home church in which is St. Stephen's African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jacksonville, Florida. And as I mentioned before, another of our members' granddaughter is associated with the University of North Carolina. And when I think about UU, we are associated with every human being, everywhere, suffering joys and sorrows, which is why our reflection on how we act, behave, feel, believe, and love, and call each other in when there's some sense of scoundrelness that we accept, matters most to us. We cherish all human beings. We love all human beings, and we have to stop the rhetoric of hatred of any group. It's self-hatred. Help us all to teach all to love themselves so that they may love others better. And thank you.
Instead of a time for all ages today, we are going to do our water communion. This is an annual ritual which we perform every year when we come back together in the fall, usually after a summer break, though some of us don't take the summer off. This year is particularly poignant, considering the year we just had. And it's interesting, when I think about the year that we just had, so many of you have approached me over this past year to thank me for the work that I've put in for this church. And I don't see it like that. To me, I didn't hold this church together. Labor did. Your labor. The physical labor that you expelled being here on Sunday morning, either physically or virtually. The physical labor you expelled, making sure we had coffee hour, or sound and video. The emotional labor you expanded when you adopted or created a new covenant and adopted the 8th principle. The internal labor you undertook as you reconsidered yourself and your values time and again during services or adult faith development programs. The social labor you embraced just by reaching out to a fellow member, engaging in small talk on Sunday morning. It was labor which held this church together. And why did you do that? That wasn't because of me. Honestly, I don't know why you did it. I imagine that your reasons are as varied as you are. Perhaps you did it because this church is like a home for you. Perhaps you did it because you believe in the possibility of this faith tradition. Perhaps you did it because you love the people who are here. Perhaps you did it for reasons that I can't even think of because I can only go based off of my own limited life experience. Whatever the case, I want you to take a moment right now to think about why you are here. What is your reason? And I want you to keep that reason in your mind as you come forward down the side aisles, or up the side aisles, down the middle, and pour some water into our basin here. If you didn't bring water for today's water communion, that's okay, because we do have pitchers of water here. You can use those. Just make sure you keep that idea in your mind, the reason you are here. Come forward. thank you all for giving your waters today. Here in front of me, I have a few more drops of water I'd like to place. In this rather gross, to be honest, looking container is the water from years past. This is the water from last year's water communion, which contains trace amounts of water from the water communion before that and the water communion before that and before that. From this container, I pour some water for all those who came before us. I pour some more water for all those who could not pour waters today, either because they are joining us virtually, or they could not be with us here, or they could not come up to our table here. Another pour, finally, for what is to come. And with that, our water communion ceremony is complete. And I would like to invite our children to join me out on the playground to play in some more water.
Share the plate is for the Tecum Farm in Mount Healthy. Tecum Farm, a 3.5-acre nonprofit farm in the neighborhood of Mount Healthy, Cincinnati, engages in sacred work of restoring people, community, and creation. Through meaningful work and spiritual practices, Tecum Farm offers its guests an experience of belonging and belovedness. We will learn more about Tecum Farm during next week's service. If you are inspired to donate to Tecum Farm or to support the work of First Church, there are several methods of giving. These are listed in the order of service, and there are links in the description of today's service or on our YouTube channel for folks watching online. Just click on More at the end of the sermon description. If you are visiting with us for the first time, please let the plate pass you by. We're glad you're here. absolutely beautiful. Gerald's gift is Gerald's gift for us. Let us never forget. It's absolutely beautiful. And when we don't understand, we just have to say it as well. This morning, I'll be reading as scripture from the New International Version of the Bible, Matthew, the 20th chapter, verses 1 through 16. The parable of the workers in the vineyard. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, my friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I'm generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last.
Victory to the miners! Victory to the miners!
Marching in the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill-lofts grey, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we go marching, marching, we battle to for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Our starve as well as bodies, give us breath, but give us roses.
Bread and roses indeed. The whole world needs bread, and yes, the whole world needs roses too. Is it too much for someone to ask that in exchange for their labor, they are compensated in a way that sustains them, at the same time that it allows for them to have joy in their life? For most of the world, that question gets answered with a resounding, I don't really care if you live in misery. If you haven't figured out how to support yourself and your family, then you don't deserve to live in anything but misery. That is the hard, cold reality of our world's dominant economic system. It is a system that has taken the abundance of our world and concentrated it into the hands of a very few, leaving more than 90% of the world to dwell in misery. The truth, however, is that there still is enough for everyone to sustain themselves and to have a quality of life that makes life worth living. That is the tension of faith, of people of faith and conscience must live with. That's the tension that you must live with. The question with which we Unitarian Universalists must wrestle are, how do we build that better world, that beloved community that we talk so much about? And to what extent are we part of the problem that we seek to solve? In both the reading from the Christian text of Matthew and from the Bread and Roses video clip, we get a couple of decent answers from which to start. Let's go to the Gospel of Matthew. In this parable from Jesus about the vineyard workers, we see one of the quintessential universal salvation stories that one can find in the Christian Bible. This parable and many of the parables of Jesus are central to the development of Universalist theology, and therefore it is central to the traditions of our faith. The message is that it doesn't matter how late you come to the workplace of the world, or what skill level you have, or what position in life you occupy, your compensation is going to be just and life-sustaining. In fact, Jesus depicts God as saying, I will make the last first and the first last. I will provide for those who struggled the most before I ever get around to providing for those who are always first in line in the workplace of life. The wretched of the earth will gain entry to the table of love before I ever allow the comfortable and the obscenely wealthy to sit at my table. That's revolutionary stuff. And we need to live with that revolutionary stuff. Even though the Gospel of Matthew is the only account of this story, most scholars think that Jesus said these words because they ring so consistently with many of the other statements about justice that he made. It is very consistent with how he started his ministry by proclaiming release to all captives and prisoners, erasing all debt from the poor, and passing judgment on the rich to force them into giving up their wealth so that the rest of the world can simply live. That is revolutionary. And if we're followers of that faith tradition, that's a challenge to us. This was the message, or as the Universalists used to call it, the good news of the gospel. Our Universalist ancestors were spreading all over America that message in the 19th century. That made them the fastest growing Christian denomination before the Civil War, even in Ohio. In Ohio alone, there were more than 60 Universalist churches existing before 1861. Now, by comparison, the Unitarian churches numbered less than a quarter of that many by 1861. Talk about something being buried deeply within our DNA. This is something that truly is. This yearning for justice, this yearning for fairness, this yearning for a way to accomplish that. That's deeply buried in our DNA. This is the kind of commitment to love and justice that is central to who we are as Universalists and as Unitarians. This is why it matters how we answer the questions I posed earlier about bread and roses. Will we rise up and demand dignity and release from misery for all people and all living things? Will we demand that all people have the right to a quality of life that is worth living? How will we and how can we do that? A part of our answers may come from the video clip that we just watched before the sermon. Now, this clip comes from a film that was made in 2014 called Pride. And it's a true story about an unusual alliance among working class people during the 1984 British coal strike. In this clip, we watch a celebratory gathering of union mine workers, their families, and members of the London lesbian and gay community who raised money for the strikers and their families. Now, bear in mind, this is 1984 when this happened. It turns out that many members of the LGBTQ community noticed that they were not being regularly harassed and arrested by the London police, as they frequently were, during this strike. And that is because Margaret Thatcher had directed all law enforcement to go after the British mine workers, who were in the middle of the most bitter labor strike in their history. Much like Reagan's assault on the air traffic controllers and the U.S. labor movement, Margaret Thatcher saw that this was her moment to destroy organized labor and the Labour Party in Britain. It was a pivotal moment in British labor history. Instead of standing by to watch the violent carnage of the police against the miners, the LGBTQ community decided to educate themselves about the situation, and then they decided to throw their lot in with the miners. They reached out to the National Union of Miners and raised money for the families of the miners. It was this unprecedented act of solidarity that the movie Pride celebrates. It took time for the NUM, the National Union of Miners, to actually accept this help from lesbians and gays, because they were subject to the same prejudices and biases that everybody else in society had. But they were ultimately won over by that community. After the strike was lost, and it was a bitter, bitter strike, lots of violence, the union miners never forgot the courage of their newly found allies. In 1985, hundreds of miners joined the Gay Pride Parade in London. Now, can you imagine that happening in the United States? This is 1984, folks. The height of the AIDS crisis, the height of prejudice against lesbians and gay. And then a short time later, the National Union of Miners cast the deciding votes inside the Labour Party to include gay and lesbian rights into their party's program. Again, think about what change that made. This is 1980s again, and the Labour Party of London in England is using this opportunity to enshrine gay rights into their party platform. Now, most Americans don't even know that there was such a strike or even such an alliance between labor and the LGBTQ community. This is a moment in which the global power of capitalism flexed its muscles to smash an international labor uprising in Great Britain and a few years later in the United States, because that strike had an impact in the United States as well. Thatcher, I skipped a section here. With their violent suppression of these strikes, Thatcher and Reagan further impoverished the already suffering coal mining communities of Appalachia and Wales. This strike was also notable for the fact that women took a leading role in both countries to save their communities from the exploitive coal companies that were destroying their mountains and their people. If you'll notice in the clip, it was the women who started the singing. That was intentional. It was the women who were married to coal miners in England and Wales, and it was the women who were actually coal miners in the United States and also the spouses of coal miners who led the fight against the coal companies. The Daughters of Mother Jones and the Welsh Women Against Pit Closures engaged in very creative responses to picket line intimidation. I could go on a long time talking about this stuff. Sometimes they'd put themselves in mud puddles and force the police to wrestle with them in the mud puddles in order to get them arrested. But the police used extremely ruthless and violent tactics against them, especially in Britain. Now, many U.S. police forces learned from the British and employed these same tactics of charging crowds on horses, and there's some amazing footage of the British police forces just running over people with horses and who were standing in strike lines. Kettling crowds to leave no escape route when they've been ordered to disperse. Kettling is one of those things where the police will completely surround a group of people and tell them that they must disperse, but they leave no way for them to disperse. And then they just start with their clubs and go after them and start beating people up, saying that you're disobeying orders. That happens all the time in the United States and in England. And then they use other military warfare methods to incite violent responses during many, many strikes. This happened in the anti-globalization actions that took place in the United States and Europe around 2001. And it also took place here in Cincinnati during that time. And it also took place here in Cincinnati and other cities during the George Floyd protests. I don't know if you were there for any of that, but it was amazing the way the police responded to that, to try to incite violence. Rather than giving in to the demands for better working conditions and compensation, the coal companies in both countries, the United States and in Great Britain, with the help of Reagan and Thatcher, they decided to use their global reach to import slave labor coal from South Africa. South Africa, the black population, many of them worked in slave labor camps and mining coal in South Africa. That coal came to the United States, that coal came to England in order to stop those strikes. This cheaper and immorally obtained coal enabled coal companies in both countries to break the strikes and then weaken the unions. Today, sadly, most mines in the United States are non-union, and the coal regions of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Southwest Virginia are among the poorest communities in America, with high unemployment rates and rampant opioid drug abuse. And that continues to ruin lives every day. That is the result of those assaults on working people. So what can we learn from these labor strikes and then these acts of solidarity? The first thing that I can see is that whenever one emerges in an act of solidarity for the right reasons, there is always the possibility that something even greater is given in return. The people who founded LGSM, Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, never expected that they would build a lifelong alliance with the entire British labor movement. nor did they ever dream that the labor movement would recognize them and fight for the collective political and social rights for the LGBT community. But they did. But it would not have happened had that community not reached out to the union workers. The second thing I can see is that even when a righteous cause is ultimately lost, and these were righteous causes, there is still something to be gained when we build movements for justice. The women activists of Wales and Appalachia asserted their rights to be leaders in a male-dominated workplace struggle, and they emerged as champions for their respective communities. Some of the women leaders of the British coal strike came to eastern Kentucky in 1988 to lend their support to the Daughters of Mother Jones, something else most of us never knew about either, as they battled the multinational coal companies who were raping Appalachia. I was working on a film project at that time, and I was fortunate enough to witness this historic gathering of transatlantic sisters who shared a common bond of doing the right thing to save their families and their communities. Their shared goals broke down any barriers that might have existed between them. From that day forward, there is still this sister bond between them and among their descendants. They still stay in touch with each other. A third consequence of solidarity is that we become better people when we engage in righteous work with other people. That is how the beloved community can be built. When we take risks to support the dignity of other people who may not be identical to ourselves, we build a connection and a community that can be lasting. That is what unconditional love for all of humanity is all about. That's really putting what we believe into practice, taking risks for what is right and what is good. In my mind, this is what Labor Day is all about. Recognizing the dignity of all people, especially when they band together to make a difference, not only for themselves, but for all of humanity. It is only because of the collective efforts of working people around the world who form unions and other types of cooperative organizations that we have international labor standards that lay the framework from which we can protect people from workplace exploitation. In the United States, this is how we won the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week with days off. This is how workplace health care was won. This is how we ended the exploitation of child labor. And this is how we will win other workplace protections that preserve the dignity of people when they work for others. Labor Day celebrates all of that. However, we have to remember those very things we won through collective action and solidarity can easily be lost by our complacency. Today, the states of Iowa, Tennessee, and Missouri have passed legislation to legalize child labor in meatpacking plants. I mean, we're going back to the days of Upton Sinclair in the jungle. Other states have made it illegal or less possible to organize unions. Companies like Starbucks and Amazon are illegally refusing to recognize the legitimate union elections in their businesses because they think they can get away with it, and they will get away with it if we allow them to get away with it. Do you remember the two questions I asked at the beginning of this sermon? Let me refresh your memory. How do we build that better world, that beloved community that we talk so much about? And to what extent are we part of the problem that we seek to solve? I partly answered that by saying earlier that we build beloved community by engaging in righteous work with others, other people who are exploited. However, we also must recognize that we as Unitarian Universalists have fallen short in that mission of righteous work. In many ways, liberal America, including Unitarian Universalists, have walked away from the labor movement. Where were we when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher broke the coal strikes? Instead of building solidarity with striking miners like the LGBTQ community of London, we sat on our hands. Liberal America could have made a difference in that strike. Some of us may have even thought that the PATCO air traffic controllers strikers got what they deserved because their union was protecting overpaid and lazy workers. The reality of the situation was that PATCO called attention to the dangerous traffic air control systems in our country and the high stress levels of their jobs. Both of these problems still exist because they lost that strike. Liberal America and UUs bought the conservative narrative that unions have outlived their usefulness and that they held back economic progress in our country. As a union leader in both the United Steelworkers and the American Federation of Teachers, I continually faced that prevailing narrative every time I engaged with the public. And so effective was the propaganda that I had to face it even in my own union members. How quickly we allow our privilege and our comfort to lull us into complacency that lets injustice roll through our entire country like a mighty stream. The task ahead in building the beloved community is not an easy one, but is one that is truly worth the effort. The great labor leader and president of the American Railway Union, Eugene Debs, said it best. While there is a lower class, I am in it. Where there is a criminal element, I am of it. While there is a soul in prison, I am not free. Those are the foundations for building true solidarity and true beloved community with people who suffer from injustice. Whether we want to admit it or not, we are as shackled as the most oppressed people on earth when we allow evil to triumph through our own inaction. We have nothing to lose except our chains. That's what Karl Marx said. As I have said before, this kind of willingness to struggle is right here in our own DNA. We have a great and storied past of members of Unitarianism and Universalism standing up against all odds. Many of the founders of the modern women's rights movement were Unitarians. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucy Stone. They both were Unitarians in the Rochester Church. They worked along with Frederick Douglass to oppose slavery, and then they also tried to better the lives of all people. Susan B. Anthony was also a member of that church. Peter Clark, our own member, stood up when it was time for him to stand up. George Hoadley, another member of our congregation, became the governor of Ohio with the promise that he was going to outlaw all of the black codes that discriminated against people of color. Peter Clark marshaled all of the black vote in Ohio to switch from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party so that Hoadley could get elected. And they accomplished it. They got rid of the black codes in Ohio, but it took until 1883, many years after the Civil War, before we stopped legally discriminating against people of color. But that came from our church, this very congregation. Now, Hoadley paid a big price because he lost the governorship in the next election because nobody in the white establishment really thought that he was going to follow through with his promise to end the black codes. But he did. and he paid the price. He was no longer good in politics in Ohio, and he had to leave the state to find work. A former governor. So this is the kind of DNA that we possess. It's buried deep within us, and it's something that we need to draw from. We need to remind ourselves of what Rosie the Riveter, and I would think Rosie Park would also say, in that great World War II Union poster, we can do it. Amen. And now we're going to stand, and if you're willing and able, and sing Solidarity Forever, for the union makes us strong. The words will appear on your screen.
Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving midst the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. They have taken unfold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
So we're going to, as we close out today, we're going to read the words that are printed on the screen as we close out the chalice. We extinguish this fire until we